The Patternist Approach. The human-centric approach to intelligence is fundamentally wrong. Although great progress has been made toward a theory of general intelligence by studying human behavior, cognition, and the human brain, the human-centric approach and the belief that consciousness is synonymous with intelligence, that only human beings are capable of displays of intelligence, is not only flawed, but is the greatest obstacle to finding a complete theory of intelligence. Intelligence is not consciousness. The isolation of intelligence to only human beings has led to the dismissal of countless observations of other living organisms and their problem-solving abilities and solutions to maintain existence. This self-imposed limitation, based on a false premise, results in a lack of data from which the principles for a complete theory of intelligence can be drawn from. Only by expanding the phenomena of intelligence to include all living organisms and all their activities, from reproduction to protein receptors, camouflage, and beyond, can the universal set of principles that govern all biological phenomena, principles that all living organisms use and rely on, be more readily found. Human beings are biological. As such, the requirement of a complete theory of intelligence to be able to explain all biological organisms and all their activities must also fully explain the entirety of human-related phenomena: human intelligence, consciousness, language, science, engineering, mathematics, theory creation, technology, music, art, and so on. Anything less would be incomplete. This absolute requirement for a complete theory of intelligence to be able to explain all biological phenomena is arrived at from the sheer number of observations of the results of the process of biological evolution. Evolution is intelligent. It is an act of hubris and human-centric thinking to claim evolution is not intelligent when it has clearly shown great displays of creativity and ability to engineer systems and mechanisms of immense complexity. After all, the process of evolution produced human beings. It produced the human brain. It produced human consciousness. It produced countless solutions to maintain existence in a universe filled with natural disasters, predation, and the decay of time, in the same universe that human beings reside in. Evolution is stupidly intelligent. A distinction must be made here between the theory of evolution and the process of evolution. The current modern theory of evolution, based on the synthesis of reproductive success and population genetics, is inadequate at fully explaining the process of evolution, let alone account for all the various techniques employed by biological organisms to maintain existence. The modern theory is not detailed enough. It cannot explain or generalize the representation that occurs in genetics. It cannot explain or generalize the act of reproduction or the act of eating. It cannot explain how brains operate. It cannot explain communication in all its aspects. It cannot explain why defining species is problematic. And it does not dare go beyond the biological substrate and into the technological realm, even though it can be clearly demonstrated that technology also evolves in the same manner. The modern theory of evolution, though powerful in its current explanatory scope, is still far from complete. Many questions remain unanswered, and even more have yet to be noticed or asked. If anything, it is the false premise that the currently accepted theory of evolution is complete, that all biological phenomena have been solved, that there is nothing left to learn about biological organisms, that all answers can be found within the principles of Darwinian evolution and population genetics. It is this naive belief in what is demonstrably false that adds another layer of blindness to the existing inability of scientists and philosophers to solve the problem of intelligence and consciousness. Had it not been for this double layer of blindness, the first false premise being that only human beings are intelligent, the second false premise being that the theory of evolution is complete, a theory capable of explaining intelligence and consciousness would have been described years, if not decades, earlier. It is an absolute failure of those seeking a theory of intelligence to overlook the countless results of biological evolution and not use them as clues, or even outright ignore and dismiss them, in their search for a theory of intelligence. The problem has already been solved. The process of evolution has already produced intelligent systems. The problem is not one of engineering. The task is not to gather resources in order to experiment and build an intelligent system from scratch. No. The problem is one of description. The task is to describe what the process of evolution have already accomplished. The experiments have already been done. The data already collected. Every single organism that exists or has ever existed is an experiment, an unignorable data point. Over billions of years and countless generations, both failures and successes, the process of evolution has utilized a common set of principles to create organisms that can maintain existence in a hostile universe. In the one and same hostile universe that human beings reside in, and thus by the purest of logic, must ultimately all be governed by the same set of fundamental principles. This book will correct the massive errors caused by the human-centric approach to intelligence. This book will completely discredit the human-centric approach by expanding intelligence to include all biological phenomena, showing that the intelligence phenomenon and biological phenomenon are one and the same, that a truly general theory of evolution that explains all biological phenomena is inseparable from a truly general theory of intelligence. This book will complete the theory of evolution by presenting a radical new concept: evolution as the propagation of patterns, living organisms as self-propagating patterns found in the environment. A new theory that will be more detailed and fundamental, fully describing the process of evolution and all its paradoxes, and will be built upon the success of the current theory in the same manner that Einstein's relativity is built upon Newtonian mechanics. Life itself will be redefined as a library that can find and store the recognition of patterns that helps in the propagation of that library through time and space. This book will clearly define both intelligence and consciousness. This book will show that intelligence came first, not consciousness, and that consciousness itself is a biological phenomenon, a product of the intelligence process. As such, a theory of consciousness can be developed by first addressing simpler biological phenomena and then progressing to more complex ones, ultimately reaching consciousness. This book will explain the principles behind the recent advances in artificial intelligence, including neural networks, large language models, and the categorization and labeling of data for training. This book will explain the neuronal algorithm, showing how neurons operate as units of pattern recognition, how neurons can effectively detect, compare, and store patterns, and thus how networks of neurons can give rise to the sought-after products of human intelligence, how memory, prediction, learning, language, theory, science, and consciousness can all ultimately be reduced to patterns and the interactions of patterns, and thus to the connections of individual neurons. This book will reveal how all metaphors work, how all theories function, mathematics and physics operate, and how it is even possible that inspirations from biological neurons can be translated into a silicon form to produce intelligent behavior. This book will show that there exists a common set of principles that govern all biological phenomena, including all human phenomena, and that this set of universal principles must be found and described at all costs, all starting from first principles. The expansion of intelligence to include all biological phenomena makes finding a set of principles for a complete theory of intelligence easier, not harder. There is now an overabundance of data, an overabundance of examples, an overabundance of well-documented observations. Every activity carried out by a biological organism, including the organism itself, becomes a clue, a data point to find the set of principles. Compare this universal Patternist approach to the human-centric approach, which relies on a single data point, human beings, making theory construction extremely difficult simply due to the lack of available data. The method we will use to find such a set of principles is pattern recognition. Gather large amounts of data, identify patterns within, and extract out those patterns to be used as principles for a theory. It is through this universal method that the viable set of principles of representation, recognition, reproduction, and randomization are found for a complete theory of intelligence, that given any biological or intelligent phenomenon, the phenomenon can be broken down into aspects of representation, recognition, reproduction, and randomization. A viable set of principles for a complete theory of intelligence. 1. Representation. The use of one set of objects to represent another. For example, genes represent proteins, maps represent land, and numbers measure quantities and lengths. Language, mathematics, simulations, scientific theories, and models are all forms of representation. 2. Recognition. The detection, comparison, and storage of features, leading to categorization, naming, and differentiation. Examples include protein receptors, enzymes, sensory organs, self-recognition, mechanical sensors like radar or smoke alarms, and any act of identification. 3. Reproduction. The propagation of patterns. Beyond biological reproduction, this principle covers the manufacturing of products, the reproduction of ideas, knowledge, and skills. 4. Randomization, the generation of variation to search for patterns. This is seen in exploration, novelty, experimentation, meiosis, mutations, and even consciousness to carry out efficient search. This specific set of principles is not important. It is the attempt to find a universal set of principles that underlies all biological phenomena that holds the most value. If a more inclusive set is discovered, then this particular set must be discarded in favor of the more inclusive set. All that matters is the belief that such a universal set exists and must be found. This is the essence of the Patternist approach to intelligence. The accounting of all biological phenomena approach is what separates Patternism from all other theories of intelligence. For a Patternist, there exists a common set of principles that all organisms, whether human beings, diatoms, or viruses, whether carried out by individuals or a population, whether occurring through culture, language, or technology, all make use of and rely on. It is through the interactions of the principles in the set that results in all biological phenomena. That all biological phenomena can be broken down into aspects of the common set of principles in the same manner that all objects in the universe, in regard to their motion, can be broken down into a single set of interacting physical laws of motion. The question of why such a universal set of principles exists is a question about patterns. It is through patterns that Darwin and Wallace developed the theory of natural selection. It is through patterns that Newton formulated his laws of motion, and later Einstein developed relativity. In combat sports, combatants search for patterns in their opponents to exploit. In biology, organisms are classified based on the patterns in their genetic material and morphology. The basis of all sensory organs can be generalized as tools for detecting patterns in the environment. Mathematics is considered to be the study of patterns found in strict symbol manipulations. Science seeks to record and systematize patterns found in nature. The current revolution in artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, is due to computer implementations of pattern recognition algorithms. The abundant use of patterns in all fields of human endeavors should indicate that there is a rich philosophical foundation for the study of patterns. Yet, as of the writing of this book, no treatise exists that specifically explains what a pattern is or how patterns are used, despite their extensive reliance by all living organisms. Patterns have simply been ignored. This book, in addition to completely discrediting the human-centric view of intelligence by expanding intelligence to include all biological phenomena, seeks to lay the foundation of patternism. To clearly define patterns both practically and philosophically, as well as to provide the tools of pattern recognition, describe the principal mechanisms of repetition, prediction, natural selection, and categorization, which are used by all adaptive systems to find patterns. The belief of patternism is the belief that patterns form a fundamental aspect of reality in the same manner that time and space are fundamental. Patternism is the belief that what lies at the core of all biological and intelligent phenomena, including all errors and inconsistencies, are patterns. All philosophical inquiries and paradoxes can be reduced to questions about patterns. Only by clearly understanding what a pattern is can any progress be made towards a theory of intelligence, towards a theory of evolution, towards a theory of language, towards a theory of consciousness, towards a theory of theory creation. For a patternist, all fields of study are subfields of the study of patterns. Intelligence is no exception. Intelligence must be viewed such that any system that can adapt and learn is intelligent regardless of whether it is conscious or not, regardless of whether it is carried out by an individual or through a population, regardless of whether the learning and adapting is carried out across different generations. Regardless of medium, all intelligent systems, whether biological neurons, neural networks, the immune system, genetic evolution, and even science itself, utilize a common set of principles to adapt and learn. That in the end there is only one intelligent system, a single structure of universal recognition, that takes on many different forms. For a patternist, intelligence is the ability to find and utilize patterns. It will be shown that only this patternist definition of intelligence can meet the strict requirement of a complete theory of intelligence that is inclusive of all living organisms and all their activities. Consciousness is no exception. For a patternist, consciousness is the ability to recognize patterns in oneself and break away from those patterns. It is the ability to differentiate oneself from the environment, to categorize self from not self, and to create and use representations of the self in the acts of self-referencing. Consciousness helps an agent randomize. It helps an agent avoid getting stuck in loops. It enables an agent to learn new things by recognizing patterns already learned and paying greater attention to novelty in order to discover new patterns. Consciousness allows an agent to be unpredictable, especially in the presence of another intelligent agent, particularly if the other agent is human. Since human beings excel at finding patterns, and since the greatest threat to a human being is another human being, it is crucial for survival to defy following predictable patterns in case a rival is observing and seeking to do us harm. Ultimately, consciousness is the ability to define oneself as a pattern and maintain that pattern, to understand oneself as an evolving pattern, and to direct one's own evolution, and it will be through patterns and the paradox of the pattern that consciousness will be explained. It will be through patterns that language, mathematics, science, physics, music, and the act of eating can occur. It is through patterns that prediction, reasoning, perception, and deception occur. It will be shown that it is through patterns that consciousness occurs, that consciousness is a biological phenomenon, and thus the principles of representation, recognition, reproduction, and randomization can be applied to break down and analyze it. Furthermore, since consciousness involves finding of the pattern of the self, the act of turning an intelligent system onto itself, the pattern recognition mechanisms of repetition, prediction, natural selection, and categorization can be fully implemented to find the pattern of the self, and thus be utilized to create fully conscious systems. It will be shown that the proposed viable set of principles of representation, recognition, reproduction, and randomization are merely secondary principles that can be further reduced to the fundamental principle of patterns, that patterns and the paradox of the pattern form the first principle for a complete theory of intelligence. It will be shown that patterns lie at the core of all biological and intelligent phenomena, and we will begin with a game.